Oops. Well, good morning. Well, first, I'm blown away by that harvest number, $20,000 for a special offering raised for our preschool that we're starting in January. So praise God for that. Thank you guys for your generosity, and it's exciting to see what God's going to do through that generosity. And so, thank you. That is incredible. Well, the last two chapters of 2 Samuel have been two of the roughest chapters thus far in our series that we've gone through 1st and now 2 Samuel. And the plan is to finish by the end of this year, 2 Samuel. But as we come to the chapter this morning, it trumps both of those chapters put together in the content of it. This chapter is unsettling. It's unsettling. And it's meant to be, because it puts on display the ugliness of sin. So we're coming to 2 Samuel chapter 13, and I've titled this sermon, Wolves in Disguise. And throughout Samuel, we've been studying King David. And David is the second king of Israel, and he's ruling in Israel. Now, this is 1,000 years before Jesus comes to the earth. And he's ruling in Israel. He reached his peak of power and influence, and he blew it in 2 Samuel chapter 11. If you remember that famous story of David and Bathsheba, where all the men are gone at war, and David's home, and he's bored, and he sees a beautiful woman, and he sleeps with her. She happens to be one of his mighty men's, his friends, Uriah the Hittite, his wife. And he gets her pregnant, and he tries to cover it up. And to do so, he brings Uriah back from war to come and be with his wife, so that the pregnancy that happened, Uriah might believe it's his own son and not David's son, right? And Uriah, in his honor, refuses to go home to sleep at the comfort of his home and to be with his wife because his comrades were at war. It's the soldiers' code of conduct at that time that they would not lie with women during wartime. And they kept themselves. And so Uriah slept on the steps of the palace. And because of that, it warranted his own death penalty. And he carried the sealed envelope to Joab, the commander of the army, and David commanded Joab to send Uriah to the front lines of the battle where the fighting was fiercest, and then pull back from him. And so in so doing, Uriah the Hittite was killed by the swords of the Ammonites on the order of David. And because of that comes fallout. God brings judgment upon David. And in 2 Samuel chapter 12, Nathan the prophet calls out David for this wickedness, how David had scorned the law of God in his complete ingratitude for all that God had done for him. He had taken what wasn't his to take. Because of that, judgment comes. And we see in this chapter, judgment is continually coming upon David and his household. It's the fallout from David going nuclear. So David's disregard for God's law, we're going to see, has now given his family license to do the same. And a guilt-ridden David now has no leg to stand on, no moral high ground to stand on, and he lacks the resolve to bring correction to his sons in similar areas to where he himself has failed. So the fallout is going to continue, and it gets ugly. So 2 Samuel 13, open up with me. The verse 1, we'll have the scripture on the screens as well for you. Beginning, verse 1. Now Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar. And Absalom and Tamar are son and daughter of David's wife, Maacah, who was the daughter of Talmai, the king of Geshur. That'll come up a little bit later. But so Absalom, he's the third son of David, third in line as far as the birth order is concerned for the throne. Moving on. And after a time, Amnon, David's son, loved her Tamar. And Amnon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. So Amnon was David's firstborn son. Amnon is the crown prince. He's first in line for the throne. He's the son of David's wife, Ahinoam, the Jezreelite. 2 Samuel 3:2 tells us that. And we read that Amnon made himself ill with his pent-up desire, this forbidden desire that he had for his sister, for she was of marrying age, but not to Amnon, because a marriage between a half-brother and a half-sister is forbidden. And notice, it doesn't even imply that Amnon wants to marry his sister. It says of him, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. So we notice here that he is not in love with his sister. He is in lust with her, consumed by his lust for her. And instead of pushing it from his mind, he dwelled on it continually, fantasizing about her, yet knowing he could not have her. And he allowed it to consume him. He allowed it to drive him crazy, into sickness of mind, which made him physically ill. Verse 3 goes on, but Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimea, David's brother. So this is Amnon's cousin and also Amnon's friend, so-called. And listen to what Jonadab does next. And Jonadab was a very crafty man. Okay, so this is not a good thing to be very crafty. He shares in nature of our ancient enemy, the devil. And we'll see in his first words to Amnon his craftiness. Verse 4 goes on, and he said to him, O son of the king. So Jonadab's beginning with this kind of manipulation, this flattery. O son of the king, why are you so haggard morning after morning? Will you not tell me? Amnon said to him, I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. You mean to say your sister, right? Amnon, your sister. But we see how in his lust, he's separating her. It's my brother Absalom's sister. He's already trying to justify himself in his mind. She's the sister of my brother. Verse 5, Jonadab said to him, lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to see you, say to him, let my sister Tamar come and give me bread to eat, and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat it from her hand. Anybody can see that Amnon getting what he wants here will spell his destruction. But Jonadab has no regard for morality. He's clever, but has no regard for morality. And Jonadab comes up with a plan for Amnon to get what he wants, the chance to be alone with Tamar. So Jonadab here is called Amnon's friend, but he is far from a true friend to Amnon. A true friend would want what's best for Amnon, for his friend. He would want to help him overcome this desire that's wrong, that's forbidden in Amnon's heart. He would try to pull him away from the situation and not give an advice and an idea of how to accomplish this desire that he's wanting that will spell his destruction. So in no way is Jonadab a true friend of Amnon. Sometimes we think, being a good friend is like helping our friend get what they want, even if it's wrong, even if it's sinful. And in telling them the hard truth, you might drive them away. You might be a bad friend by doing that, but that is a true friend. And somebody who recognizes that will love you all the more for correcting them. So Jonadab gives Amnon the green light, and he gives him a way to get what he wanted, with no thought to Tamar, no thought to Amnon's soul. Verse 6 goes on, so Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. He did it. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, please let my sister Tamar come and make a couple of cakes in my sight, that I may eat from her hand. Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him. So David, he indulges this selfish request from his firstborn son Amnon. He's got plenty of servants who can make him food, but he wants his sister to bring him food. So this is Little Red Riding Hood now being beckoned to bring food to a wolf. Verse 8, so Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, where he was lying down. And she took dough and kneaded it and made cakes in his sight and baked the cakes. And she took the pan and emptied it out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, send everyone from me. So everyone went out from him. Then Amnon said to Tamar, bring the food into the chamber that I may eat from your hand. Tamar took the cakes she had made and brought them into the chamber to Amnon, her brother, Amnon the wolf. But when she brought them near to him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, come, lie with me, my sister. She answered him, no, my brother, do not violate me, for such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do this outrageous or this godless, this wicked thing. Verse 13, as for me, where could I carry my shame? And as for you, you would be as one of the outrageous fools, one of the godless or vile fools in Israel. Now, therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you. But he would not listen to her. And being stronger than she, he violated her and lay with her. So Tamar's words were tender. They were well-reasoned. She appealed to Amnon's better judgment. She offered up a solution. Hey, go through the proper channels, through David, through the king. That such a thing is against the law of Moses. It forbids this sort of thing between a half-brother and a half-sister in Leviticus 18:11. So I think perhaps Tamar is wanting to get out of this situation. I don't know if she actually thinks David would give her in marriage to her half-brother. Who knows? But beyond this, she warned him of the truth that if he took her now, it would be to her shame. And it would reveal Amnon to be one of the fools, the wicked fools of Israel, which Amnon is indeed a fool of Israel. And her wisdom was lost on him, and he raped her. Verse 15, then Amnon hated her with very great hatred, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, get up, go. So in Amnon's hatred of her, it revealed that he never really loved her at all. He lusted after her, and he called it love. And often our culture doesn't recognize the difference between lust and love. The lust we see here is a godless love, a love that only takes, it only seeks to fulfill its own desires. It does not consider the other. A godly love is driven by no such base desire. A godly love is, as the Apostle Paul helps define for us in 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8, saying, love is patient and kind. True love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Amnon does not have love, and he certainly does not love Tamar. He did the exact opposite of what love would do. He was not patient. He was not kind. He was rude, and he insisted on his own way, even forcing his own way upon his sister Tamar. And after he became resentful of her, and he despised the truth of his own foolishness, he did not bear with her in her pain, but cast her out and ended his so-called love and showed himself to be the wolf that he is. He cast out the person that was the reminder to him of his sin. He did not care for her in the slightest, robbing her of her chastity and honor, and then taking no responsibility. whereby compounding his sin. And Tamar tells him as much in verse 16. But she said to him, "No, my brother, for this wrong in sending me away is greater than the other that you did to me." But he would not listen to her. He called the young man who served him and said, "Put this woman out of my presence and bolt the door after her." Now she was wearing a long robe with sleeves, for thus were the virgin daughters of the king dressed. So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her. So what Amnon did to Tamar is horrible. Yet he could have still somewhat redeemed the situation by paying the bride price and marrying her if David allowed. And if David refused, he would still have to pay the bride price for her, for taking her that way. But this being this incestuous act makes this whole thing just icky. So by casting her out, man, it's icky. So by casting her out and taking no responsibility, Amnon has sealed her fate. He's sealed his own. Like his father, he thought he could make the whole thing go away by sending her away, pretending nothing happened. But as David found out, and Amnon will soon find out, this type of sin always catches up to you. And in fact, David and his family is still reaping what he sowed. He's still reaping what he sowed with his murder of Uriah the Hittite and taking his wife Bathsheba. David's sons are acting out just like their father did. And who suffers because of it? The innocent. It's why the Lord despises the sin of man and judges it severely, for the Lord sees and knows the extent to which our sin harms others. God's law was given to protect the innocent, to reveal righteousness and goodness, to show us what is good, and also to bring judgment upon wickedness. But God's law is utterly scorned, and this is what we get. Verse 19, "And Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the long robe that she wore, and she laid her hand on her head and went away, crying aloud as she went." And her brother Absalom said to her, "Has Amnon your brother been with you?" He knew. Perhaps he knew the character of his brother Amnon, the crown prince. Absalom goes on, he says, "Now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this to heart." Hold your peace. She's violated, cast out, and now she's silenced by her brother. So Tamar lived, a desolate woman, in her brother Absalom's house. When King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. The Dead Sea Scroll and the Greek Septuagint texts both include after this statement, though, saying, "But he would not punish his son Amnon because he loved him, since he was his firstborn." So Tamar has no justice. And David sits on his hands, refusing to punish his son, but by doing so, he punished Tamar. Verse 22, "But Absalom spoke to Amnon, neither good nor bad. For Absalom hated Amnon because he had violated his sister Tamar. After 2 full years, Absalom had sheep shearers at Baal Hazor, which is near Ephraim, and Absalom invited all the king's sons. And Absalom came to the king and said, 'Behold, your servant has sheep shearers. Please let the king and his servants go with your servant.' But the king said to Absalom, 'No, my son, let us not all go, lest we be burdensome to you.' He pressed him, but he would not go, but gave him his blessing. Then Absalom said, 'If not, please let my brother Amnon go with us.' And the king said to him, 'Why should he go with you?' But Absalom pressed him until he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. So 2 years have gone by, but Absalom has not forgotten. He has been plotting his revenge this whole time, to seek revenge for Amnon's sin against Absalom's sister Tamar. So he invited his brothers to this sheep shearing event that was kind of like a celebration. You come, you shear all the sheep, you celebrate kind of like the harvest coming in. That's when they get to sell all the wool. So they have a meal, they celebrate. So he invites his brothers to this. Verse 28, then Absalom commanded his servants, mark when Amnon's heart is merry with wine. And when I say to you, strike Amnon, then kill him. Do not fear. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous and be valiant. So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and each mounted his mule and fled. The mask comes off. Absalom, like his brother Amnon, is revealed to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. And as we read these tragedies unfold, we're brought back to last chapter when Nathan proclaimed in judgment against David, he said, the sword will not depart from your house, David, because you scorned the word of God. Because you did this wicked thing. And we see now the sword has not departed from David's house. One son has murdered another. Verse 30, while they were on the way, news came to David. Absalom has struck down all the king's sons, and not one of them is left. Then the king arose and tore his garments and lay on the earth, and all his servants who were standing by tore their garments. But Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother, said, let not my lord suppose that they have killed all the young men, the king's sons. For Amnon alone is dead. For by the command of Absalom, this has been determined from the day he violated his sister Tamar. Now, therefore, let not my lord the king so take it to heart as to suppose that all the king's sons are dead, for Amnon alone is dead. Jonadab, the crafty cousin, sees this for what it is. He knew exactly what Absalom had in mind when he invited his brothers, specifically Amnon, out for this feast. David, not believing his son's capable of such deception and wickedness, is now fooled twice by them. First Amnon and now Absalom. And David, neglecting the law, failed to punish Amnon, has now tempted the hand of Absalom to take revenge, to take the law into his own hands. Yes, Amnon deserved the death penalty for what he did to his sister according to the law, but it was to go through the proper channels. Absalom did not seek these proper channels, telling Tamar to keep her peace, stay silent. I'll take care of this. And he schemed up his revenge, and now he has accomplished it. Verse 34, but Absalom fled. And the young man who kept the watch lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, many people were coming from the road behind him by the side of the mountain. And Jonadab said to the king, behold, the king's sons have come. As your servant said, so it has come about. So Jonadab is very self-satisfied that he was right. And he's just completely ignorant of the tragedy itself and the solemnness of this situation. He's clever, but he has no morality. I told you so. Verse 36. And as soon as he had finished speaking, behold, the king's sons came and lifted up their voice and wept. And the king also and all his servants wept very bitterly. But Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ahimahud, king of Geshur. He went to his grandpa, his mom's dad, the king of Geshur. And David mourned for his son day after day. Verse 38, so Absalom fled and went to Geshur and was there 3 years. 3 years. And the spirit of the king longed to go out to Absalom because he was comforted about Amnon since he was dead. So 3 times we read that Absalom fled. He fled knowing his guilt. He fled in fear and anger. He fled from one seat of power to another where he would plot his rebellion. The distance and the time made David's heart soften towards Absalom. And after losing one son, he did not wish to lose another. So David here is pretty extreme in his grace, or some may say negligent, to his sons and their rebelliousness and their wickedness. Amnon was unrepentant, and now Absalom is unrepentant, and David just wants the whole ordeal to go away. He wants to have Absalom with him again. Be careful what you wish for. David's son, Absalom, now thinks he can run the kingdom better than David can. For David failed to carry out justice, and Absalom carried out justice in his own mind. So we'll see how this plays out the next few weeks with Absalom. So we see from this text, lesson 1 is that if you delay or fail to punish evil deeds, evil only increases. Ecclesiastes 8:11 says of this, because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. So when there's no justice, when there's no punishment for evil, then people take the law into their own hands as Absalom did. Or they will see the success of lawlessness and join in the fray, lest they themselves get left behind or taken advantage of themselves. It is why carrying out sentencing quickly is so crucial to deter further criminal activity. David failed to do this. And Absalom waited 2 years. And there was still no justice for his sister. So he set his heart to do evil, to take vengeance, and set himself in the place of the judge and his servants as the executioners. If David had disciplined Amnon at any point in his life, he probably could have prevented him from ever raping his sister Tamar. And failing that, he could have prevented the murder of Amnon at the hands of his brother Absalom. But he did not. Lesson 2 from the text. Like Little Red Riding Hood, this story is a warning to us. It's a warning to us to be on guard, to guard our children, sometimes from themselves, sometimes from the wolves disguised as sheep. Charles Perrault is credited with writing the first version of Little Red Riding Hood, and at the end of it is 1697, I think when he wrote it. At the end of the story, he wrote this moral of the story. And he writes, children, especially attractive, well-bred young ladies, should never talk to strangers, for if they should do so, they may well provide dinner for a wolf. I say wolf, but there are various kinds of wolves. There are also those who are charming, quiet, polite, unassuming, complacent, and sweet, who pursue young women at home and in the streets. And unfortunately, it is these gentle wolves who are the most dangerous ones of all. So Tamar discovered that the wolf was her sick brother who needed her help and her help alone. Amnon discovered that the wolf was his neutral brother who included him in this family event again. And he gave him wine and lots of food, and helped him to relax and be at ease when he struck. There are ravenous wolves in the world. They must be guarded against. They must be guarded against. Which is why we do background checks of all of our children's workers, all of our volunteers that work with the kids in the back. Our kids must be guarded. They must be taught. That's why these stories like Little Red Riding Hood and Tamar and her brother Amnon are reminders to us to teach our kids to be on guard. And for us to not trust blindly. Scripture says we must be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. We must be able to think like Jonadab, but not be totally lacking in morality, as Jonadab was, but to be gentle as doves. Have the wisdom to guard one another, rather than using our craftiness to take advantage of and help wolves like Amnon. So, wise as serpents, gentle as doves. And speaking of Jonadab, this brings us to lesson 3. Surround yourself with wise counsel. Who are you surrounding yourself with? Whose advice are you listening to? Do you have somebody who can speak into your life? Notice that this chapter comes on the heels of Nathan rebuking David for his wickedness. And now we see the opposite. Amnon is not being rebuked for his attraction to his sister. Instead, he is being encouraged and told how to act out upon this wicked desire by Jonadab. Jonadab doesn't care about the law of God. All he hears is that his friend and his cousin, Amnon, has a desire. Amnon needed a Nathan, but he got a Jonadab. Amnon knew his desire was wrong and immoral, and he was distressed because of it. He knew it. He was distressed because he couldn't do anything about it. We know when we're being told what we want to hear, and we welcome it. We welcome it. But when we're told difficult things, we might not be thankful at first, but it will spare us in the end if we heed it. So what instruction are you seeking out? Are you seeking instruction that tickles your ears, tells you what you want to hear? Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. Are you seeking wise counsel? Is Jonadab your authority, or is God's prophet Nathan your authority? One gives us the green light for our fleshly desires, and it brings forth weakness and death in us. And the other is sometimes a bitter pill to swallow of self-control and abstention, but it brings forth strength and life. Amnon's sin was a result of a lifetime of self-indulgence and never telling himself no, and never being told no by anybody else, for he was the crown prince. So when he wanted something, he took it. He'd already trained himself to give into his desires, and it would be sickening to not have what he wanted. Amnon only cared about Amnon and didn't consider anybody else. And so, of course, Jonadab is a confidant for him, because Jonadab tells him exactly what he wants to hear, and he's smart enough to help him get what he wants. So the warning we get from the text is that if we search it out, and even if we don't search it out, the enemy will always send a crafty Jonadab to us, disguised as a friend or wise advice to help us follow our will and not the will of God. So be on guard. Be on guard. Final takeaway. God sees and has a plan for Tamar. There are many today who might resonate with Tamar. Tamar, the one true victim in this chapter. Tamar is first not listened to, then violated, then deserted, then silenced, and finally left desolate. Where's the hope? Where's the redemption? How can this happen? Amnon reaped the death that he had sown. Absalom got what he wanted, vengeance, and it was wicked. But Absalom killing Amnon did not restore Tamar. All it did was satisfy Absalom's desire for revenge. Absalom told Tamar to be silent, and he bided his time for 2 years. And we're told for that time, Absalom was neutral towards Amnon. He didn't press charges against him. He didn't plead the case of his sister. He simply waited for Amnon to let his guard down, and then he struck. And yet now Tamar is left without her brother Absalom, who has fled the kingdom. And she has a dead brother Amnon, and no one has restored her. She was violated and cast aside. She had no other sisters either. 1 Chronicles 3:9 names David's sons, It says all these were David's sons, besides the sons of the concubines, and Tamar was their sister. By all accounts, David only had one daughter. "19 sons, not counting his concubine sons, and one daughter. She was a great gift of God that David failed to protect. Then he failed to comfort. Then he failed to redeem. Then he failed to bring her justice. And Tamar's tragedy is made all the more bitter by her tender words of warning and her righteous wisdom, and then being silenced by her brother Absalom. So the one who had righteousness, the virgin, clothed in righteousness and robes signifying her purity, speaking words of wisdom, beautiful in heart, soul, mind, and body. She stood in bright contrast to her weak-willed brothers, and they did to her as the world did to Jesus, the sinless one, clothed in righteousness, was betrayed, abandoned, forcibly taken, beaten, mocked, whipped, and crucified. The one who spoke words of wisdom, who spoke the words of God, was rejected by those who desired to satisfy their own desires above and beyond that of God. Amnon refused to pay the bridal price, the price to redeem Tamar, but Jesus paid it in full. The world turned their backs on Tamar, but God did not turn his face away. No, he redeemed her for eternity. Where one son of David raped her, the true son of David, from the lion, from the tribe of Judah, the root of David has conquered, and he has redeemed her. As Revelation 5:5 says to us, "Weep no more. Behold, the lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David has conquered," so that he could open the scroll and its 7 seals. We are told to weep no more. For Jesus is conquered. And when he opens the scroll and its 7 seals, his truth and justice will reign. This age will come to an end, and his age of eternal rule and reign will begin in earnest, where he will wipe away every tear. And just as our Lord Jesus redeemed Tamar, he has redeemed you. The Lord has brought you in, bringing his healing balm upon our wounds. That by his wounds we are healed. And he purchased you. And he offers you forgiveness and freedom from sin. For all have fallen short of the glory of God. All have sinned. But the good news is this: Jesus conquered. He was tempted, yet without sin. And he willingly gave himself as a last sacrifice to atone for sin and to conquer death through his resurrection. And this morning we get to come to the table to remember that, to remember just how far he went for us, that he has borne our iniquity, he's borne our shame, and he's brought forgiveness. And so the ushers are going to come forward and distribute first the bread and then the juice. And we're going to come to the table to remember our Lord. That he's brought us forgiveness. He's redeemed us. He's healed us. He's made us new. And so as we receive the elements, I ask that you hold on to them until everybody is served, and then we will all partake of them together.
Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love